All right, well, hello and welcome to the webinar today on whole family building blocks, attending to organizational culture and systems. We're happy to bring you this webinar from the Learning Communities Resource Center. We're in the midst right now of a three-part series, so there are other webinars you might want to look out for on other building blocks of the whole family approach. But just to give you a few housekeeping items before we get started today, I'm going to be running the behind-the-scenes technology for today's webinar. So if you do have any trouble with audio, you can chat me, the host, Courtney Kohler, through the chat window, and I can attempt to help you. Also, another trick, if you have any troubles, you can try to reboot your audio or switch your audio from computer to phone or vice versa through the Communicate tab, which is in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. And you can go to Audio Connection and attempt to either switch your audio or adjust your volume. Everyone is muted for this presentation today, just to cut down on background noise. However, we do want you to engage by asking questions or making comments through the chat window. So you can hit the little chat bubble that you should see towards the bottom of your slides to make that panel come up. And then you should be able to enter in any questions, and we ask that you do send questions or comments to both the host and presenter, so all of our panelists can see that, or you can select all panelists. So we'll be taking some time to stop throughout the webinar and take questions or comments, so make sure you enter those throughout. And then, of course, any technical questions you can send directly to me, and we can attempt to get you set up. One more item to announce. We want to make sure that you know that the slides will be available after today's webinar, and this webinar event is being recorded. So you'll be able to find follow-up materials on the partnership website, and that's in our resource library. You can go to the webinars portion of that to find those after the event within about 2 business days usually. All right, so thank you all for your time today, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to Tiffany Marley. She'll be getting us started with today's webinar.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Courtney, for that introduction. And I am happy to offer all of you a warm welcome to today's event, Whole Family Building Blocks, Attending to Organizational Culture and Systems. I would like to invite us to direct our attention to the promise of community action as we seek to ground our conversation today. And that promise states the following: community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. And it is with this in mind that the Learning Communities Resource Center seeks to live in to its mission or its focus, which really cuts at building capacity or the network's capacity to fight poverty and really to fight that poverty on both to both fight both the causes and the conditions of poverty, and really pointing to those effective, promising, and innovative practice models that really allow us to achieve results more effectively. And it is important to note that the work that we do as a project, and especially today's presentation, couldn't be done without the Learning Communities Resource Center team, which you see here serving in the production role today. As you all have already heard, is Courtney Kohler, our Senior Associate for Training and Technical Assistance. And today's presentation will be led by Jeannie Chapin, who is a consultant on our project and really functions as subject matter expert related to our whole family approach work. And so we thank Jeannie for her work and for leading us on today. And so very quickly, let's just take a quick moment to look at our agenda for today. We will offer you all with an overview of the community action whole family approach building blocks, recap the importance of leadership as was presented during last week's webinar presentation, and then engage you all in a discussion related to attending to organizational culture and systems. And then we are very, very excited to have with us a very special guest and one of your peers from the network, Dana Jones, who is the CEO and president of United Planning Organization here in Washington, D.C. He'll be leading a conversation on leading organizational change that will be followed by an opportunity for you all to ask questions, which our panel will be happy to respond to those questions, and then we will share with you all some of the resources. And so with that said, let me say this. We all are in the anti-poverty business and often have an opportunity to look at and reflect on the poverty statistics and their fluctuations. The bottom line is that millions of families in our country are still living in poverty, and even more, and there's a large subset of them who live in deep poverty. And the question that we must ask ourselves as a network who's been around for over 50 years is, are we going to continue to do business as usual? I hope the response is no. And really, it is our intent to provide resources and really provide a frame for discussion for us to begin to think differently, how we might attack the complex problems facing our families, so children, their parents, and families, and even individuals, but to attack those complex problems with new, innovative solutions that actually work. Because at the end of the day, it is our desire to achieve greater impact because the needs continue to evolve and change, and we must be adaptive to that, especially at this point in time. And so as we think about this whole notion of redirecting strategy, so for many of us, we may touch on various domains from employment, education, asset building, early childhood and development, just a whole range of things to meet the needs of families. But really what we're trying to get at as we are talking about this approach is in what ways might we engage these various domains in a more integrative fashion that brings about a different kind of change and really accelerates that change and increases impact. And so there again, redirecting strategy will mean change, and so the ways that we have traditionally maybe facilitated services in those domains that I've just mentioned will require a new look. It requires leadership, and there's going to be a lot shared later today to offer a little more insight on what possible integration might look like from a whole family approach. And with that said, let me take a moment to tell you a little bit about the whole family approach, and that is that as a network, we have long recognized the need to offer comprehensive services and in an effort to mobilize families or to mobilize customers, and really because we've always had a holistic approach, This whole notion of service integration or bundling services is not new to us. However, in some regards, the way that we think about it still needs to shift or change, because it's not about just setting up a new program or a new project, but it's really about allowing an attitude that says that the various services that the agency facilitates requires different attitudes, different processes, and different practices in a way that makes those services and resources.
All right, well, I think Tiffany just lost audio. So, Jeannie, do you want to maybe pick up
Sure.
from here unless she gets reconnected?
Yeah, I can do that. I am happy to do it. If you'll pass me the ball so I can advance the slides, that might be helpful too. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Tiffany was talking about the whole family approach, and the characteristics of a whole family approach are that families' goals are shared across programs. The goals include outcomes for children, parents, and families. So it's not just having Head Start goals for a child or adult goals for a workforce program, but having goals for everyone in the family and really aligning the services to meet the unique needs of that particular family. So some families may need education for the child and education for mom, and other families may need work for mom or dad and education for the child. Also, a characteristic is that it's easier to access services. They're more coordinated. A lot of two-gen whole family work is really based on no wrong door. And then a really important characteristic is that all of the services for the family, for both the parent and the child, are high quality. They're intensive. These are, at least some of the services must be intensive, not light touch. If we're really working to move families out of poverty, we've got to have some intensive services. They need to be intentional and for the parent and the child at the same time. So it's not whole family characteristics. Whole family approach is not about serving the parent now and the child later, but really serving the family at one time. Also, the part of the whole family approach is that it is comprehensive, and so Tiffany mentioned domains earlier, and we sort of have those classified in this Aspen Ascend framework that includes social capital, the networks, the friends, the neighbors, the supports for the family, mental health and health care for the parents and the children, some attention to economic conditions such as assets and housing and bundling services to help improve the economic situation, post-secondary and employment pathways, helping with early childhood, helping a parent with expanding their education, and then the early childhood. So those are sort of the components, the domains that must be presented in a whole family approach. Not that a community action agency would necessarily provide all of those, but that you would partner and coordinate and serve as a coach and a catalyst of bringing those things together for the family. And, we're focusing on the whole family approach today because we have a number of community action agencies that have committed to shifting to a whole family approach. So this whole issue of attending to organizational culture and systems is important to them because they're making a shift. But obviously, we need to attend to organizational culture and change for a lot of reasons when we're maybe pursuing other new initiatives. It wouldn't just be for whole family, but we're focusing in on whole family because that's a particular emphasis of the partnership now. And one of the things that we recognize is you can't talk about organizational change without really delving into leadership. Leadership is a linchpin for making change. And so as Tiffany mentioned last week, we went in depth on a webinar and talked about what is leadership. And we really see leadership in the framework that we're talking about with whole family or with community action as taking responsibility for enabling others to achieve a shared purpose in the face of uncertainty. So we're really trying to use leadership as a foundation to help people align their purpose, their vision, and move together to create change. And we've also sort of talked a little bit last week about leadership is not a practice or a position. The authority is earned and not bestowed. There are lots of people in an organization that can be leaders at many different levels and in many different spaces. And we really want to approach this work from that idea that we're all capable of leading change in an organization, and that it's really about relationships and what our values and our interests and assets are. So if you want to look at more on leadership, you can go back to our webinar last week. We talked a little bit about leaders motivating action. So today, as we're really focusing on organizational change, it makes sense to remind ourselves that leaders can really create urgency, can inspire some anger and some hope, which can be big motivators, create solidarity, help people believe that they can make a difference. And all of that can really overcome the kind of feeling and the kind of culture that really can inhibit change. So as Dana's probably going to give us some real-world examples here in a minute about, you've got to break out of inertia and apathy and fear and isolation, and leaders can help to do that. So in our sort of thinking and model, leaders motivate action. They accelerate change and accelerating change really requires leaders to help their staff, board members, and stakeholders commit to a shared agency vision. We really want to harness in our organization the wisdoms, gifts, and skills of everybody on the team. That's going to be necessary to solve complex challenges and really embed change and be successful. We're going to need as many eyes and ears and hands as we can on these change efforts, so we've got to tap into a lot of different people in order to achieve our outcomes and our improvements. So these are just a few slides that we used last week, and we thought we'd weave them in here just to, again, make the point that, a precursor to good organizational change is leadership. We all know change is hard. And John Cotter, who wrote Leading Change and has been a leading thinker on leadership, these slides are from his work, and he says that 70% of change efforts fail, and that it's really time that we get past change fatigue and we use proven processes and proven practices. And part of what he has proven is that, leaders exist at every level. Leadership is a choice, and change begins with one leader. And we can model change and not force change upon others. And so Cotter's work really builds on that, and it's about leadership and not management. And those of you out there that are CCAPs have done a lot of thinking about this. What's the difference between management and leadership? When we're in the managing mode, we're really planning and budgeting and organizing and problem solving, versus when we're in the leadership mode, we're aligning people, motivating, inspiring, having a clear vision, articulating that vision. And in Cotter's work, he says that the larger the change, the more leadership is required. So if you're in an organization right now and you're really thinking about shifting the organization to a whole family approach or to a more entrepreneurial mode or whatever that change may be, the bigger the change, the more leadership you can count on needing to harness. And so in Cotter's 8-step process, he really talks about how to take steps to make a successful change effort. And we're not going to go into these in detail today. We did the first 3 of these last week, the establishing a sense of urgency. Why should people change? What's the case for changing? Who is going to help you guide the change? Who is your guiding coalition? I will speak a little bit more about that here in a minute. And then developing a change vision. And so those are the first 3 steps. And they're very foundational, and really getting those right can really line you up for a successful change effort. In Cotter's sort of dual operating system, which is really a way to bring a lot of leaders to a change effort, you can imagine the agency hierarchy there on the left. So it looks like the structure of many of our agencies. And what he is sort of recommending to successfully move change is to take volunteers from throughout the organization, all different levels, all different programs, and create a guiding coalition and a network of folks who can bring their hearts and minds and wisdom to the change effort. So that's just a little teaser on Cotter. And you can look back at our webinar, and certainly there's a lot of stuff on the web that you can read about his leading change. Here's the link. When we post this, you'll have access, but on the Community Action Partnership website, you can access the leadership session from last week, and then as Courtney said, we'll be posting this information. So just wanting to give some context here. As I mentioned, the partnership has probably 30 to 40 community action agencies in a few different learning communities who are working to shift to a whole family approach. And based on the knowledge that we have from agencies that have already moved through to a whole family approach, whether they're in community action or someplace else, and the needs that those agencies that are working on this have articulated, we know there are certain things that we need to attend to make a successful shift. So, we've got to listen to families and hear family voices. We've really got to integrate parent and child services. We need to be designing all of this with an equity lens. We need to think about policy change as well as practice change, aligning an array of different services, all those different domains that I showed you before. We've got to align services, secure funding, of course, and then build leadership and attend to organizational change if we're going to be successful. And so today is an effort for us to talk a little bit more together about attending to organizational culture and systems. All of those building blocks you can find on a document that we have on the Community Action Partnership website, and we'll point you to that document as a follow-up to this webinar today. But each of those building blocks are sort of laid out like the things you might want to think about inside the Community Action Agency and outside the Community Action Agency with your partners, with your community in each of those areas. And then there's a variety of resources that we've collected and provided a link to for each of those building blocks, including the one we're talking about today. So building block 7 is about attending to organizational culture and systems. And just to highlight that a little bit, in this building block, we're really talking about your staffing issues, restructuring, training staff capacity, We're talking a lot about communication, whether that's internal communication and external communication, and then also talking about data and information and continuous quality improvement and knowing how we're doing and getting better. So those are sort of the big bucket items that are included in this building block. And I thought it was sort of worth sort of mentioning today when you're thinking about organizational culture and systems. We're all sort of, if you look at the center of this model, we're all focused on, you know, our whole family approaches or some other change that you might be making. It's generally to improve outcomes for a target population or for a community. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. You can potentially coordinate your intake, focus on the family, get folks in the community to provide different services, have common outcomes. There's a lot of different ways we can change our practice so that we can improve those outcomes. And so having families and outcomes at the center and then thinking about our practice, thinking about administration, thinking about policy is pretty normal, and we do that all the time. But in this model, what they're sort of asserting is that you have that improving outcomes in the center, or if you think about viewing this differently, the tip of an iceberg is changing the outcomes, and practice and administration and policy are all up at the top of the iceberg, sort of above our sight line. But below our sight line with this iceberg metaphor is all the things related to leadership and organizational systems and organizational culture. And as we all know, anybody who's tried to make a change, you know, it's often that stuff below the waterline that we don't pay enough attention to, and that sometimes catches us, right? We don't do the buy-in work that we need, and so the culture doesn't change, and even our best practice ideas don't get embedded. So I think this is a really great visual to sort of get us focused on thinking about what is below our sight line, what is down there in leadership and systems and culture that we need to pay attention to as we make changes. When you are thinking about organizational culture, one of the first things that you often hear people talk about is vision and what is shared success. And really, without having a clear vision and spending time talking about what that vision is and what success looks like, you're going to be at a disadvantage. So I'm going to skip a couple of slides here that we had in here if maybe we had time, because I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to hear from Dana's story. But sometimes when you're talking about that shared success and vision, from a community action perspective, really thinking about the community action business model of being focused on what the goals are across the agency and not just by programs, not just by particular funders. So I'm going to move on out of shared vision and just sort of give a nod to the importance of communication, communicating that shared vision, the executive director having a guiding coalition with frequent communication, and really a team structure that supports communication is really important. Some community action folks last week got to go on a site visit to Brighton Center in Kentucky, which is a community-based organization that really focuses on the whole family. And we noticed when we were at that site visit that there were a lot of cross-agency teams and leadership teams that really were helping communicate a shared vision. And so I think that's certainly something we need to pay attention to. And then, as I mentioned, the staffing, human capital issues, supervision, how you structure supervision, to support change and new practice and promoting culture, an ongoing learning culture and training and all those kind of things are really important when we think about organizational change. And then finally, data and improvement, talking about the capacity for data analysis, data management, CQI, those kinds of things really help to successfully shift an organization. So this is great. We're going to now get to hear from Dana Jones, CEO and President of United Planning Organization, which is the community action agency for Washington, D.C. And Dana has been in community action for a number of years. He served as the National Partnerships President and has been represented on many different committees and has been a leader in community action and has really led a successful shift at UPO. And so we thought it would be good to hear from Dana a bit about how that successful shift at UPO happened, what sort of tools and tips could he give you as leaders for trying to make a shift inside a community action agency, if it's for TUGEN or if it's for another reason. Some of you may be joining us today not just because you're trying to shift to a whole family, but for other reasons. So I think we'll work on passing the baton over to Dana. Hopefully that'll be smooth. And then you'll have time to ask Dana some questions. Please put those in the chat as we go, and we can make sure Dana has those as he's moving forward. So, Dana, I'm going to hand it off to you now.
Well, thank you, Jenny. I want to say good afternoon to everyone, and I want to share a little bit about the UPO story. And in this particular case, I'm going to start the story around 2012 because we made some decisions in 11 about making a significant push through our strategic planning process to really change the organizational culture. And in doing that, we put together two teams. One team we called POP, which was product outcomes and performance. The other team was called BOSS, business opportunity systems and supports. And so in putting those teams together, we reached out deep into the organization and brought together a number of people to work on key issues. As the leader, I presented them with not just a vision, but some challenges by virtue of some questions that I wanted them to ask. Among them were, what things are we good at? What things are we not so good at? How do we get better at those things that we are good at? What things do we need to build capacity for? How do we build capacity? And we went through a series of soul searching and, if you would, internal assessments that basically identified internally our own weaknesses and our own strengths. We also recognized and we paid close attention to what was happening in the environment that we're around. So nothing new about that, an old strategic planning process. But what was different about it was who was involved. And so we said that at every level of the organization, we wanted people involved because we believed that the answers were in the room. And so the other part about this is where we created the sense of urgency by establishing timeframes and timelines that we really wanted to focus on. And so we had meeting intervals in which every team had to report. Now, key to that is that what happened in that process was that the guiding teams that were working on these issues had responsibilities to the people that they were taking information back and forward to. And at the same time, what you see happening is leaders emerging at multiple levels in the organization because people are passionate about their points and understanding where we want to go. We got away from conversations about programs. If you go to our website, you'll see something that reads something like, we're educators, we're dream builders, we're opportunity makers. Because quite honestly, if you look at isolated programs, there is no isolated program that I know, including the wonderful, great, comprehensive Head Start program, that can move people out of poverty by itself. So at the end of the day, it's about the collective impact throughout the community that will actually help us move our customers out of poverty. And so we have to look larger than ourselves and think differently than ourselves. We came back and pulled together and established what amounted to 6 strategic goals. But in doing those goals and pulling those goals together, we charged every unit with creating a tactical plan. And so it was one thing to have strategy, but it was another thing to have the tactics that would move it further along the line, and be mindful that those goals weren't just program goals. So they had to look at other issues that would help move people along a continuum. We continued the process of communicating throughout the entire organization. You have to stay connected. And you have to be, if you're going to lead an effort like this, you have to be self-differentiated, and that you have to be assured of what you're doing, positive about it, and understand that change creates anxieties with people. But if you're anxious, if you're not calm in the midst of the storm, nobody's going to follow you. And so leadership does matter, and it becomes important to understand that you have to be grounded, listening to what people are saying, and offering a vision. We were doing this as a result of the work that our board had done. And we'd spent 2 years prior to that time with our board just getting to the point of coming through with new mission statements, new vision statements, and wrestling with the material in our community needs assessment. So it's important to understand that prior to staff touching it, we engaged with the board and the community in a massive way. Our community needs assessments are not little undertakings here. They produce our major data points. And so from those data points, we perform our analysis, and then we make our decisions. And our boards made some decisions with regard to revamping the mission statement and the vision statement. And with those in hand, then it became our job to really go back and work with staff and the staff teams to come back to the board and say, this is the how. And so that's what we worked on. We continued the process and developed those tactical plans, but then we did something else. Once we developed those tactical plans, we decided that we wanted a performance management system that would allow us in the appropriate intervals to continue our assessment, because you can't have continuous improvement if you don't have continuous assessment. And so we actually reached an agreement with a group called Compass. Compass is a regional group of volunteers from Fortune 500 companies. They come from the top business schools in America, and they will volunteer for a year on a project with you. We got a team to work on assisting us in building our performance management system. And I keep telling you guys, everybody wants to think of vision as being some supernatural look into the future. I'd like to think of it more as a collection of experiences applied to a context with an intent of reaching a certain outcome or certain goals in mind. Not simply some pie in the sky, this is where we're going kind of approach, but something that's more concrete. I actually used the format to start that Compass team that I've had since 1976, that came from Madison, at the University of Wisconsin that I had been working on changing and making different iterations on since that time. We used it. They took it, put their own spin on it, and came back to us after about 9 months of ongoing engagement with our team and produced our performance management model. We have since updated it probably 3 or 4 times since then. But that model became our process for our ongoing assessment and looking for continuous improvement. And so with every step of the way, we had to make some real key changes. One of the things that we did in this process is we decided that we've been a Head Start provider, as an example, for since the inception. As a matter of fact, one of the trial classrooms or research classrooms for Head Start in 1965 was operated by UPO with Yale University. We decided that we needed to rethink in our current context. With the rise of pre-K, we are an environment, we lead the nation in the availability of preschool programming paid for by the local government. So what's the role of Head Start in an environment where 97% of the children ages 3 to 5 can go to public school? So we looked at it and we looked at the research and we said, well, the gap here, our data is telling us that the real gap here is in services to children from 0 to 3. And so we started the first iteration of our transition, which took us immediately from 100% Head Start to 70% early Head Start, 30% Head Start. To do that, the board committed resources. And this is one of the things that we have to be mindful of. You can't have change without building staff capacity. Our board, over a 3-year period, invested $2 million in sending staff to school. How do we do that? We partnered with universities who came on site and taught our staff. We ended up with, out of that process, 70 people getting at least an AA degree, and we had a number of people to get bachelor's degrees and a number of people who ended up with master's degrees. And so building our capacity allowed us to really deal with the questions of quality in a different way. In addition to doing that, just in that as an example to build on the Head Start model, we then decided that that process could not be left only to the classroom, the academic classroom, but we needed to make sure that we had an ongoing training and assessment process. So we developed a coaching model, and we still use that model today. We do reflective supervision. We tape our classrooms. They, at staff development, once a month, twice a month, you get to look at your tape. You get to look at what you're doing, your interaction with children, and we ask key questions. How could you have done that better? What about this child here? Is she engaged? How do we move forward? So it required us to really rethink what it is to run an organization. How do we deal with quality, and what are our quality circles? On a larger, broader community, agency community scale, we decided that we would do team assessments quarterly. What does that mean? The outcomes based upon your goals and your projections for each unit takes place in a half-day session on which all of your peers are in the room from the top leadership and guiding team perspectives. Here they're called office directors or division directors, and you present. And the team asks questions, and the team makes recommendations, and the team talks about further integration of the product delivery. Why aren't you using this? Would you be better using these resources? How do we internally strengthen this so that families get the biggest bang for the buck? In recent months, I'll give you an example of that taking place. After listening to the HR team discuss their challenges in filling Head Start positions, and Head Start talking about their student to teacher ratios and how that was impacting their quality outcome, the training staff said, well, fine, let's build a training program using our resources at your center, and we'll target the parents for the training. Once they're trained on the CDA, let's then take them a step further, let them intern for fee in the Head Start centers, and then as they go through the portfolio development, when they reach the top of that, you hire them full time. And so we did just that, and it's worked extremely well. But that process of ongoing assessment, that process of asking the next question becomes critical. The other thing is that we made some decisions in our strategic planning process that there were some things that we were just not going to do. We're not going to be an agency that does emergency services. We've got plenty of community partners that do that. We're a community action agency. We're not a social service agency. We brand ourselves as a human and community development organization. We believe that there are necessities that need to take place and some basic needs that need to be addressed. But we think in our context, there are plenty of other resources for that to happen with. So we have a partnership with the Capital Area Food Bank. We have a partnership with some, so others might eat. We have partnerships with others who deliver those products. But here, we focus on the journey. And the journey has three parts. One, the journey to education. Two, a journey to careers. And three, a journey to community. And that streamlines everything that we do. We operate 36 to 40 different programs throughout the year. But everything falls in those three buckets. You're either focusing on education, you're either focusing on careers, or you're focusing on community building. And so by doing that, we have been able to keep the team moving consistently. The ongoing assessment process is healthy. We spend a lot of time communicating and reminding people, and we spend a great deal of time in orienting people who are new to the organization, because that's one of the challenges. Staff development has to be a continued process. We have a couple of resources that we continue to use from the outside. We have a university that offers week-long training twice a year, once each semester for staff. Our staff, we have an intentional staff development program that actually starts with performance management and is tied into HR based upon identified needs and based upon things that people have self-identified as areas they need improvement in. We take topics, and the university develops the training programs for those areas. And we use that as an ongoing process of continuous improvement for staff development. Of course, we have trainings. We have an agreement with WIFLE that is right now it's a 6-year agreement. Every other year they come here and they teach the standards. We do that intentionally because we want to make sure that we stay locked into the most current thinking. We encourage our people to stay in the academies, go to school, continue to be engaged in that process. But we encourage something else from leaders, and it's not wasting time. You have to have leaders who are reading. You have to have people who are looking at best practices and constantly finding ways to improve upon what you do. and asking the difficult questions. That's the purpose of the assessment process. Along the way, I'm just going to say the other part that I would share is this. Don't get too anxious. Don't get too impatient. Change sometimes, depending upon the culture that you're in, is a transitional process that requires leadership to stay firm, stay grounded, and not to become anxious. If you become anxious, then your strategy is going to be challenged even more. That's a quick overview. Some of you know that this year we won the Agency of Excellence Award. That is a testament to that process working for us. It's a testament to the people who continue to put in the time and the energy. We had our staff meeting on Friday, all-day staff meeting Friday. We had 300 plus employees present. Again, reiterating, communicating, asking questions, recognizing individuals, and promoting quality improvement. I don't care what you do with regard to whether you're looking at 2Gen or whatever strategies you want. If you're going to facilitate change, it starts with assessment. It must be led with honesty. There must be ongoing communications and an openness. Whoever calls themselves the leaders in the organization must be connected to others and must remain connected to others, because if they don't, it will not work, because communication will not flow. The other part is this. You need to empower people to become leaders of their own and be able to take care of their own business, be ready to accept some short-term results until you get to the long-term vision that you want to deal with. But just stay persistent. Don't give up on it. That's all I've got to say. Jeannie, you there?
Jeannie, we're not.
Yeah, here I am. I forgot I put myself on mute in case the dog started barking.
Oh, you're good now.
Dana, I'm going to ask you a question, and I've asked folks to put questions in the chat, but as folks are entering in their question, I was just going to ask you, as a leader in community action, and you worked in community action before you came to UPO, so you've seen different agencies, and certainly as a national leader, you've seen into a lot of agencies across the country. What are there particular books or training programs or programs that have been helpful to you to prepare you for leading change? Is there anything you would like to recommend? I really appreciate that you said all leaders should read, but is there anything in particular you would direct people to?
Yeah, long ago, before I came to UPO, I became a fan of Drucker's, and so a lot of his issues around management were there. But what I also did long ago, and I still do, I subscribe to the Harvard Business Review, and I make it available for my people also. And so we stay in the review, and we read a lot of the books from the review. That's why I'm familiar with Carter's work,
right.
And others, because that's a key part of what we do. The other thing is that we engage in a lot of the webinars around addressing poverty and the issues of families and children and other content areas. The advancement technology makes learning and the opportunities for learning wonderful. And so, but I would recommend that the money spent on the Harvard Business Review is probably the best money I spent in terms of ongoing learning.
Great. Good. Could you talk a little bit more about Compass? You mentioned that in passing, but I wonder if people want to know that.
Okay. Compass is a local nonprofit. They're in a lot of areas that focuses on bringing private sector talent to assist nonprofit agencies in improving their systems, their business operation systems. They will focus on resource development, they'll focus on governance, or they will focus on performance, and so strategic planning. So we had performed our strategic plan. What we really wanted to do was to build a performance model that allowed for ongoing continuous improvement. And so when we engaged them, you actually go through an interview process. You have to be selected. And they selected us because we had, in fact, done so much work on our strategic plan and had all of these tactical plans. So they felt like it was a doable project in a year. They came in, they meet with your board, and they ask your board to establish a guiding committee for their work. And that committee meets monthly with that team, and the team meets twice monthly with the internal workers making the work happen. They estimated their value to us over that year at somewhere in the neighborhood of $160,000. But they helped us perfect our performance management system, and it was a great resource for the private sector.
Great. Good. Thank you, Dana. We really appreciate your time today, and I encourage folks to reach out to Dana and his leadership team, and if you have other questions or want to visit more about particular items. So I'm going to pass. I think my colleague Tiffany is back in place and has her tech issues addressed, and so I'm going to hand her the baton to just highlight some other opportunities for learning. As Dana said, we need to all be learning, and she can point you in some good directions for learning opportunities. So, Tiffany?
Thank you very much, Jeannie, and really thank you so much, Dana, just for that wonderful insight that you offered, and we will take all of that to heart and to mind. And I want to just let everyone know that as an organization, the partnership is focused on providing you all as our customers with ongoing learning opportunities. And one of the ways in which we do that is through our weekly webinar series called Webinar Wednesdays. And so we encourage you to visit our website to learn about upcoming events, and we're excited to let you know about the next webinar that will be taking place in the Whole Family Approach Building Blocks series that will focus on aligning high-quality services and programs for families. And so that webinar will take place on November 7th, and so we encourage you to tune in for the next webinar in this series, but there's several others that take place. Additionally, I'd like to bring your attention to the partnership's updated or new improved website, where we have a new partnership resource library. There you can search for specific webinars, so there's a link for you to just click on webinars, and all the past webinars that we featured are archived there, as well as our publications and tools. And so speaking of reading and staying in tune with what's going on in research and in the field, as Dana has offered, our team has curated tons of tools and resources across the various anti-poverty topic areas, as well as it relates to effective management and practice and like performance management, et cetera. So we invite you to check that out. But there's just a wealth of resources, and if there's something that you are looking for that you can't find there, we strongly encourage you to just send us an email, and we will be more than happy to point you in the right direction. Along with curated resources, we have the CSBG TTA Resource Center, where our long-term tools and resources have been archived. And then want to point your attention to the week of January 15th through the 18th. At that time, the partnership will be hosting its winter conference, a management leadership training conference. We will be in New Orleans and really are excited about just the range of topics that we will be able to cover, from advocacy to strategic communications to racial equity. There's just a lot. There's a wealth of information that we will share, along with just the matter at hand, and that is, what does it mean to lead effectively as a local agency, as the network in the climate which we are faced with at this time. And so it'll be a wonderful time of networking with peers, a great opportunity to receive national updates, and certainly to learn a whole lot. So we hope that you will join us for the event in New Orleans. And so this concludes our webinar today. We thank you for taking the time out to learn with us at the partnership and with the learning community. Thanks again to Dana Jones and the UPO team, as well as our wonderful subject matter expert, Jeannie Chaffin, for leading today's conversation. And our contact information is available for you on the screen. Make it a great day, and this concludes today's webinar. Bye-bye.